want
Okay.
to say anything else about NuStats.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to say that you specialize in social policy research.
Yes, we do.
That's what your website says.
I know it.
Rick, I take it we're ready because I'm on there. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Dill. I'm a faculty member here in the School of Urban Studies and Planning, and along with my colleagues Chris Monsieur and Rob Bertini, we help organize this weekly seminar. And a couple logistical things before I introduce our speaker. In case you didn't know, we do webcast the seminars, both live and they are archived. And because of that, we ask that if you're going to ask a question, to use the microphone. And I need to really remind you to keep the red light lit while you're asking your question, because apparently in the past few weeks, often the questions cut out on the audio. And so that is for whoever is watching us on the web can hear your question in addition to the answer. So it's not projecting in terms of volume at all. So that's our logistics. The sign-in sheets for students is going around. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Johanna Zmud, who is a partner with NuStats, Inc., who is a firm based in Austin that specializes in survey research related to social policy issues. Johanna has an interesting history, as I read, as I somewhat knew and read on the web. But she also completed a PhD at USC in communications, looking at attitude and behavior measurement, which is what she's been doing years and years of work on lately. And so today she's going to talk about some work that I'm very excited about in the Oregon area in terms of a new travel activity survey.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
Do you want to hold questions till the end, except for clarification?
You know, it really doesn't matter. I have about 20 slides, so whatever works for people. If I say something and you want to stop me, just go ahead and stop me. This will be very informal. What I'm going to be talking about is a pilot test that we have going on right now in Portland, but it's a pilot test for a statewide survey that's going to be done starting next year in the state of Oregon. And I'm really focusing here on the survey methods. I'm a survey researcher, so I'm going to be talking about the survey methods piece of it. There is another presentation for those of you who may be going to the Transportation Planning Applications Conference that's here in Portland, starting on Sunday. On Monday morning, there's another presentation on this that focuses somewhat more on the modeling implications of what this is. My presentation today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the context in which what we call it Cosmos survey is being done in, the new upcoming continuous measurement survey, about our pilot test design. And I'm really excited about the pilot test design. I've tried to talk about it here in the presentation simply, but let me say that I think it's actually one of the most complicated pilot designs that's been done, and it's testing a lot of new things. I think it's really interesting that way, and we're fortunate that ODOT and Metro were interested enough to do the kinds of tests that we're doing in this. Because I am a researcher at heart, the way that we framed the pilot test was as a series of research questions, so I have our research questions here. We're in the process of the pilot test right now, so I have some findings from the field, not a lot because we haven't really gotten into our analysis yet. And last, next steps. So I need to start by saying this is a team effort. ODOT and Metro have been very involved in the project. The lead consultant on this is PB Consult with my firm NuStats. Geostats, which is a technology firm located in Atlanta, Georgia, that specializes in GPS technology, and then Keith Lawton Consulting. I want to talk a little bit about the context in which we are designed the pilot, but more importantly, the context in which the thinking about the next survey in Oregon is being done in. The last, those of you who you may or may not be aware of it, the last large survey here, Activity and Travel Behavior Survey, was done in 1994 and 1995. My firm, NuStats, and myself were lucky enough to work on that and design that along with Keith Lawton primarily at Metro. The new survey that's going to be done And my understanding, unless this changed, is that the actual design for that survey will start happening later this summer or in early fall, is really being designed to do two things. One, collect more recent data, and two, fill in the gaps. And I just have a little bit about both of those things. More recent data, there's new modes, transit modes here in Portland. The expanded MAX expansion, for instance, wasn't captured, and the implications of that wasn't captured in the last one because it didn't exist. New communications technologies, the wireless, cell phone usage, PDAs, all of those things are really affecting the way people go about doing their activities, and that needs to be captured. And lastly, there are changing demographics in the area. In terms of filling in the gaps, there's a lot of work that's been done in the last 10 years since the last survey was done. Even though the activity, 1994-95 Activity and Travel Behavior Survey was groundbreaking, there are now a new generation of applied travel demand forecast models for which surveys are really changing to meet the demands of those models. And so we want to look at some of the things we can build into the next survey to feed that, collecting seasonal and weekend travel, getting complete daily travel. One of the things that we always have and fear is missed trips. And so how do we get a complete roster of someone's daily travel? We want to do better at capturing the interactions within household members and among households, carpooling, different things, so we can really get at the determinants, the underlying determinants of how people make their travel decisions. And interestingly enough, ODOT and Metro are really interested in these long-term determinants of travel. So the idea of doing a panel and making it continuous is definitely something that's being built in the design. So we start with a baseline, and then we do a rotating panel where we go back to some portion of that every year to see what's changing in their lives and be able to actually do some causal modeling. And lastly, do a better job at collecting transit and non-motorized modes. And as I was talking with Catherine Koffel from TriMet just now, one of the things that the modelers that I speak with and talk to are really interested in is our attitudinal and more qualitative data to really get into someone's mind and try and find out how they actually are making their travel decisions. That's the sort of outside context. There's another context in which the next Cosmos survey will be done, and that's dealing with methods issues. One of the things that surveys, whether they're travel surveys or any other surveys, are dealing with right now are response issues. There's a lower public tolerance for time-consuming activities, surveys being one of them. So we're not actually dealing, in the surveys I do, I probably do about 20 or 30 surveys a year, and of those maybe 5 activity and travel behavior surveys a year. And what I'm finding is it's not so, refusals aren't our problem. Our problem is really contacting households. People are away, they're not there, so how do we get in touch with people? And there's also, since 9/11 particularly, and with the raised awareness about personal identity stealing, this heightened concern about personal information and privacy that we're really starting to see the effects of. I saw the results of a poll that were taken right after the census, and people were asked, do you think it's okay not to answer questions on the census that you feel are intrusive? And only 67% of people answered yes, we think it's okay. That's a mandatory survey, the sentence, and people thought it was okay not to answer the questions. Our surveys are voluntary, so that gives you an idea of what we're up against. There's new survey methods. I mentioned on this our teammate Geostats, GPS. We're looking at not only internet data collection, GPS data collection. We're looking at expanding the modes that we use in any one survey to try and increase the range of getting people to participate. And also new sampling approaches. In the same way that we're trying to be more efficient with our data collection, we're trying to be more efficient with our sampling. And so one of the new approaches that's being used in sampling is something called dual frame samples or multiple frame samples. We're trying to pull our frames from different sources in a way that's still a probability sample so we can actually make statistical inferences from the data. Lastly, we've done a lot of surveys since the 1994-95 travel survey that have brought us learning, and we want to apply that. New changes in diaries, new changes in the way we ask questions. And we've been fortunate. My firm, I think, has led the way and done most of the GPS, in fact, all the GPS validations except for one that have been done in the country. And so GPS validation is when you take diary data and you also do a subset of the households that have GPS units that are provided GPS units, and you use the GPS data to actually validate your diary data. And we have a methodology for using the information we glean to actually adjust the information that we collect in the diary data. There's actually also a paper presentation at the Applications Conference on the results of the study that we did in Kansas City on that. So we're looking at, our charge with PB Consult was actually to develop the recommended survey design for the next continuous survey in Oregon. Our design challenge is where we are right now, 21st century travel surveys, what do we want to do? We want to find a better way to reach a representative sample. We want to see if we can come up with methods or ways of increasing willingness to participate in the survey. Reduce respondent burden. People don't want to spend a lot of time doing these surveys. Capture data more efficiently. How can we use technology to do that? And lastly, reduce errors. How do we get higher quality data? Our team identified some methods to overcome these challenges. As I mentioned, the first thing is a dual frame sample. What we're testing in this pilot test, and it's the first time a dual frame sample has been used in a travel and activity survey. There's only one other survey in the U.S. that's sponsored by HUD on National Family Survey that's used a dual frame sample. So this is new stuff. What we're doing is we took an RDD, which is a random digit dial sample, and that gives you very good geographic coverage of an area, but we've connected it or linked it to an address-based frame that was pulled with the same parameters as the RDD sample for trying to define precisely and geographically where we can find special populations. We're using it in the approach in our pilot study here to actually try and get a better capture transit users more in our sample. Secondly, we're testing mode of travel data capture. We have 3 different methods, and it's an experimental design. We have 3 different methods. We're using CATIE only, which means CATIE is computer-assisted telephone interviewing with a diary. We're using the CATIE with a GPS validation. That's CATIE with a subset who have GPS units of the sample. And GPS only. We're using, we have a set of households that are not doing a diary at all. They're only equipped with GPS equipment. And I'll go into more about how we're doing that. I have to say that this GPS only is the first time, also in the United States, where GPS only has been used. Secondly, one of the things people say, well, we can collect data via the internet. We can collect data with GPS units. One of the problems is that that's for the travel data capture, your diary data. That's what someone does. When you do an activity and travel behavior survey, people are assigned a travel day, Friday, April 22nd, and asked to record all their travel for that day in a diary or to wear the GPS unit for that day. But the problem, that doesn't help you with our largest source of bias and sample bias in these surveys, which is how we get people, recruit people into the surveys. That's our recruitment method. And whether you're using internet or whether you're using GPS, you're still using primarily a telephone method to recruit people into the sample. So here we're doing something different, which is we're using both the telephone and we're also using mail to try and get people to participate in the survey. Our pilot test design is 300 households, 100 for each data capture measure. We have a dual frame sample and 2 zip codes. We're using an advance letter. We're not using any incentives. I have to say that most of the activity and travel surveys that we do, we use no incentives for. We are one of the things that we're doing with the CATIE and GPS validation, and one of the things that we're doing with the CATIE and GPS validation is we're doing what we call a mailed missed trip follow-up. One of the issues with using GPS is that when you just have a GPS in the car, in vehicle, or you have GPS wearable on a person, what you're getting is you're getting time of travel and you're getting location of travel. But you don't get a lot of the other information that's collected in a travel survey, like who they traveled with, the purpose of their travel. You can try and impute it from the land use of where they went, but there's some error associated with that. So why they traveled, who they traveled with, what parking costs they paid, if any, what their transit fare was. I mean, you don't get any of that other information that's really necessary. So when we have started using, NuStats has started using what we call this mailed missed trip follow-up. When you use the CATIE, the GPS to validate the CATIE data, you actually take the trips that come out of the GPS and you segment them into trips because it's a data stream. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with GPS data. It's a 1 second stream of data. And one of the first things you need to do with it is to segment it into trips. And then you take those trips and you match them to the trips that come out of the diary. And then you see where they match up, and where they don't match up, you see that it's a trip that was recorded in the GPS and not in the diary. Well, you know that then how many trips were missed, but you don't know anything else about them. And so when you're trying to use that to come up with adjustment factors for your trips, you need to have other information. So what we do is we actually mail to people who have missed trips these paper diaries with maps, and it showed them their day, what trips they didn't record in their diary, and we asked them to fill in the other information and mail it back. It's been very useful so we have full information about the missed trips. The pilot test we're doing now is wearable GPS units. All the other times GPS has been used in the U.S. with an activity and travel behavior survey, it's been in-vehicle GPS. The nice thing about in-vehicle GPS is that it's passive. You put the GPS units in a vehicle, someone gets in the vehicle, it's on, you collect the data. But what's the problem? You don't get any of the non-motorized or transit trips. You only get their vehicle trips. So we're testing here a new generation of wearable GPS units that can be used, placed on the person, and that way we can get the transit trips and the non-motorized trips. But we actually had a little bit of a discussion about this. When you have the in-vehicle GPS, you don't have to worry about the age of the person that you put the GPS unit on because they have to be 16 and older to drive a vehicle. When we decided to go with the in-person GPS, we had an interesting discussion about how young was too young to put a wearable GPS unit on somebody. Because the idea when you do activity and travel behavior surveys now, you collect the information from everybody in the household. And the typical rule of thumb is kids from about 10 or 11 up fill out their own diary. Parents fill out the diaries for children younger than that. So we were trying to decide what age to put GPS units on. And we did some test calls, test probes during our recruitment to ask parents at what age they would let their children wear a GPS unit. And we actually came out thinking that we needed to only put GPS units on children age 14 and up. And so we have wearable GPS units on children age 14 and up. And for those other children in the family who aren't getting the GPS unit, we actually developed a specialized kids diary. So it has different activities that kids would do, like hanging out at the mall, which you don't see in a normal travel diary, or modes. We have some modes in there like skateboards. So we're going to see how that does, and we're actually going to go back and do some qualitative follow-ups with the families where children had the GPS wearables on them, so we can get more information about comfort level, things like that. Our research questions for the dual frame sample, there's 3 things we're testing: coverage, accuracy, and efficiency. It's a new sampling method. We want to know, do we get better coverage with it? We want to know, is it more accurate? Can we actually bring in and capture special populations with the address-based link to the RDD sample? And is it more efficient? What's our productivity? As I mentioned, we're testing these 3 modes of data capture. And I know I hesitated at some points in my presentation because I don't know at what point I'm talking about things that seem, since I do this all the time, that are very familiar to me and aren't familiar to those of you here. But the typical activity and travel survey has 3 basic stages. One, a recruitment stage where you recruit someone into the sample. 2, a travel day capture stage. You assign a travel day to those people or those households that you recruit. You recruit the whole household. You don't recruit one person in the household. You recruit everyone in the household or no one, or the household doesn't come in. So your recruitment, your travel day where everyone in the household has to record their travel, and a retrieval. You need to retrieve that travel data some way. And in this pilot test, we're testing traditional diary, this traditional diary with GPS validation, and what we call GPS prompted recall, meaning we collect the GPS data and we use that to go back to the respondent and prompt what they did, the other information they did. Our recruitment, we're doing 2 ways: Katie, which is telephone, and mail. And the way that we're doing that is in our advance letter that we send out a household questionnaire. And we tell people, if you don't want to receive a telephone call but you're interested in participating in the survey, fill out this questionnaire and send it back to us. And we'll get back to you, either by email or by phone, whichever way you'd prefer. In our travel day capture, we have 3 methods, as I explained: a diary, a traditional diary, a diary with the person-based GPS, where we're using the GPS to validate the diary, and lastly, only the person-based GPS. Interestingly, all 3 of those are being retrieved via telephone. So for all of them, the retrieval stage where we collect the data is via telephone. So our research questions with the retrieval are, what are the cost-quality trade-offs between the traditional Katie and the new GPS methods? I think this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because when I go out and I talk about travel data collection, everyone says, well, just put GPS units on everybody. Well, that's fine, but right now, on average, GPS costs about 3 times as much as doing a regular paper diary. So there is this cost implication. Now, if we can really try and quantify what the quality benefit is for that cost, then that would be a good thing, and it would be good knowledge for us to have, but no one's done that. So that's one of our basic research questions with what we're doing in this pilot test. We want to be able to quantify that. Another second research question is, what are the GPS mode effects? We found, and we just want to confirm and validate, by a mode effect I mean, a mode effect is when the mode of data collection affects the data you're collecting. And so what we have found in the past when we've looked at these the surveys where we have a subsample that fill out the diary and the GPS. That's the way it's done. You have everybody doing the diary, and then a subset of everyone that does the diary also has a GPS unit. And then you use that subset to adjust the data that you collect from everybody else. But what we found is that that small subset that has the GPS and the diary, they're better reporters in their diary. So the fact that they have been asked to carry the GPS unit with them either makes them more motivated or prompts them or whatever, but they report better in their diaries. And we looked at that in Kansas City, found it, looked at that, and I did that in the Southern California activity and travel survey data, found that there were significantly higher trip rates among that small subset than there were in the regular diary sample when we controlled for demographics. We want to test it here and see if we find the same thing. If we do, that means that our adjustment factors we've been underestimating the amount of adjustment we need to do. Are there any risks of using a new technology, for instance, this GPS technology? Will this pilot test unearth any new information about what happens when you put person-based GPS units on people? Because no one's done it yet for an activity and travel behavior survey. And lastly, and not least importantly, does GPS result in higher quality data? In our recruitment, where we're doing the Katie and the mail, we want to know, will people use the mail back option? I mean, if we send it out and no one uses it, it doesn't make any difference. But more importantly, does it bring in different types of respondents? That's the only way to do it. If we're missing some people with the telephone only, will the mail bring in different types? Just as a sort of point of information, this is the activity and travel log that we're doing now, and we've tested this. We've gone very simple. I remember, and Kyungwal remembers because we worked on it together when we did the one here in Portland. We actually, I think that travel and activity log in the 1994-1995 was probably 10 or 11 pages long, and now we have one sheet. The one we did in 1994-95 probably had 6 or 7 pages of instructions. We have no instructions now. We've done focus groups. We've done cognitive interviews. I've probably talked to more people in the U.S. about how to fill out an activity and travel log than anybody. And we come to simple. How do people do it? How do they do it quickly? What is the least amount of information we need to have them record in the log so that when we do our call they can remember all the rest of the information. So we've really tried to make these things more efficient. This is the GPS prompted recall screen that comes up on the computer that the surveyors use when they call them on the phone. These are the people that only have a GPS unit. What happens in that, and it's very interesting, they have a GPS unit. It collects the information for one day. It's a wearable unit. Someone comes to their house the next day, collects all the units from that house. That person who does that then goes to a centralized place, downloads the GPS data to Atlanta, where the streams of this 1-second data are segmented into trips, and 24 hours later, that information is sent to our telephone center in Austin, and the surveyors, when they call someone who only has the GPS-only data, their screen looks like this. So basically, they have this trip information in front of them, and what they're saying is, I see that you at 9-something in the morning, you went from here to here. Can you tell me about that trip? And then they ask a series of questions. And so they can either do it, there's two different zoom-ins. This is very detailed, and this one over here is a little less detailed. But that is in front of the interviewers when they're making their call, so they can go and ask about each trip that's been captured in the GPS to collect the other information. So where are we in the pilot? For our Katie only, which is our diary only basically, and our diary with GPS validation, we're in the database development stage, so we're actually putting the databases together, and we're doing the mistrip follow-up with the GPS validation sample. Our GPS only, our first travel day was yesterday, meaning our first calls back to people to collect their information starts today. That GPS data is downloaded and segmented into trips and ready for our interviewers within 24 hours. And that's really important so people will remember all the information we want to ask them about those GPS trips. We don't have a lot of answers to our research questions thus far because we are just now putting our database together, but I have some. Will respondents use the mailback recruitment? We didn't know what we would find, but we're finding about 10% of households are mailing back their household questionnaire and are being recruited into the sample. We don't know yet if they are different from the people that we got from the telephone recruitment only. If we find that they are different, then it would be worth doing that in the statewide survey. If they're not different, it's a moot point, because the whole idea here is just to get the range of travel that's out there. What are the risks of using person-based GPS technology? This was really interesting to us, and we didn't even think about it. As I mentioned, when you have the in-vehicle, it's totally passive. It's in the vehicle. People get in their car, it goes on. What we're finding is the person-based GPS is prone to some of the same respondent responsibility issues that a diary might be, meaning we're finding that people aren't using the person-based GPS units like they should. It's not totally passive. They're either forgetting them, like they'll take them someplace, they'll forget them, they won't. Even though they're on all the time, they're told to wear them so the antenna is facing up. We've found people wear them with the antenna facing down, and if the antenna is facing down, it doesn't collect anything. If they forget it, or they take it with them and they lay it down, they won't pick it back up. I mean, they take it off even though it's wearable, they take it off. I mean, all of these things that we thought that it was, GPS is thought of that as being foolproof. But once you start giving it to a person, it doesn't become foolproof anymore. So there are some issues and we're trying to, we're actually doing, in fact I did some before I left, calling up people who are given these person-based GPS units and actually trying to figure out the people that used it wrong, what was going through their heads and why they used it the way wrong. Yeah.
How big are they?
They're not that big. They're like this. Yeah, and this is another thing. We were talking about this. I was talking about this 2 days ago with Jean Wolfe, who's with Geostats, and she says it's a form factor issue, meaning the GPS with the kind of memory capabilities that we need for travel data haven't been able to get small enough so that it's a pin that you wear. If it was a pen or a watch, perhaps you wouldn't forget it, but still you'd have to put on the pen or you'd have to put on the watch. And if you're going for, like when we do the statewide survey, we're actually thinking and proposing that there would be multiple days of GPS data collection. So you would have to remember to take it with you every day. I mean, it's still not the same as sticking. When the in-vehicle units are attached and go into the cigarette lighter in a vehicle, or there's another way you can do it, but the easiest way is in the cigarette lighter input. And that's real easy. You stick it in there and it's just in there. But once you start saying, here's your unit you carried around with you, it becomes a lot different.
Yeah, I carried it one day, but the function didn't work. I mean, the unit was malfunctioning, so they didn't capture the data, but it's hard. I really consciously bring everywhere, but I don't see people going to do that. So definitely that's the big hurdle we have to
it's a
get over with the small unit, and at the same time how we can attach to them.
Yeah, Jean seems to think that we're at least two. She says 1 or 2 years, but she's thinking more like 2 years off before there is a GPS unit with the components that it would be needed that would be small enough that it would just literally attach. It could be an earring, or it could be a ring, or
Johanna, the units themselves, aren't they developing some that are going to be able to transmit the data so it's not collected on site and you can then just get it off your satellite or data collection?
Yeah, I think there's some people down at UC Irvine that have been working on that, and I think I'm not sure how they've moved forward with that, but I know that was one of the applications that they've looked at. The idea is having a wireless connection so you could actually download via wireless, right? And I think I know that we've experimented with that, but are still having problems with how the data needs to be encoded and encrypted to send it over the wireless. And then you also get into one of the issues, and I talked earlier about this heightened concern about privacy and personal information. For some reason, the little bit of testing we've done on people's perception of this, respondents feel less secure with knowing that their data might be downloaded wirelessly than if you say it's downloaded over a secure network. Yeah. Yes.
So compared to KT and the GPS device, which is more, what percentage is more based, what percentage of the surveys are more on GPS or the KT?
We've set it up so we have the same.
Equal amounts.
Yeah, we'll have data from the same amount of people. Yeah. Yes.
I can imagine that there's numerous barriers to using cell phones that have GPS capabilities, but new cell phones are GPS equipped now. Has that been explored at all, or do you think that will be at any time?
It has been explored. I think the problem with the cell phones and all of this technology is so hard to keep up with. But I think one of the barriers with the cell phones is the service provider. Like, not every service provider has the same reach. And so it's changing now with the industry is changing with the merging of so many different cell phone providers. Like, who knows, maybe in 5 years we'll only have one cell phone provider, I don't know. But I know that's been a problem in the past. And the other problem is still this memory. You know, if you're thinking about, you're collecting 1 second interval data, and so that's a lot that takes a bit of storage capability. And cell phones are getting better with their storage capability, but that still would take a pretty big hard drive. Yes?
Question about the respondents. How are you recruiting non-English speakers in the surveys? Or
For this right here, we're not worried about that. That was one of the design decisions. Typically, what we do is look at the percent of a population that is non-English speaking in a region, and say if it's over 5% for a specific language, that we would then conduct the survey in that language. That's pretty much a standard that's used. And when we looked here, we would definitely would do the survey in Spanish. But for the pilot, we were testing too many things, and so we didn't want to bring in the additional element of language. And we have a lot of experience with, the language component of things. And so what we're really focusing on here was more methods. But yeah, I think, in fact, I was just looking at Chicago because I'm working on a design for a activity travel behavior survey in Chicago. And there I thought that we would probably have to do the survey in Polish and Spanish. But in looking at the PUMS data for Chicago and that language isolation variable, really the only language that popped out was Spanish. Lastly, this thing here about does GPS result in higher quality data, one of the issues that we were concerned about going in was whether the GPS units would really capture good transit data, and would we be able to sequence out the trip from the access mode to the transit trip to the egress. And so would that be easy to do, because sometimes it's hard to know what's actually a trip or a stop and what's not. And what we're finding is the GPS appears to be effectively capturing the multimodal trips. In fact, some of the comparisons we've been doing thus far have shown several trips records where the Katy trips were, the diary was missing some of those links, whereas the GPS was picking them up. We have, I think, right now about I think it's 100 and something transit trips in our data. Next steps, we want to complete the GPS with prompted recall, conduct our analyses to answer the research questions, including the full cost assessment. Our goal then is also to give PB Consult, the database, to have them conduct the audit on data quality by data capture mode. We don't want to do it ourselves, because that would sort of like be having the fox guard the chicken coop. We don't want to make statements about our own data quality. So we did that to PBs so they'll conduct the audit. And lastly, and this is, I think, an interesting piece that we've been able to do is I've been able to interest FHWA in funding a non-response follow-up, so which would happen this summer. And so for each of these different samples that we have, we're actually going to go back to people that we couldn't contact, who are in our sample that we couldn't contact. We want to go visit them in person, their households, and collect information on their travel patterns, because one of the questions that we don't know in activity and travel behavior analysis is, do the people that never get into travel survey samples differ significantly from those that do? We all assume, and there's assumptions, that they are frequent travelers or high travelers, very busy people, and that's why they're never home to participate in surveys, but we haven't really empirically tested that. And so FHWA, because they're interested in doing research in preparation for the next National Household Travel Survey, are funding a follow-up. So we're actually following up with people who we couldn't contact at all and people who we could contact but who refused. We also specifically want to focus in on people in our GPS sample because we want to see if there are any technology effects. Do people... is there something about the technology that also tends to make people not want to participate? And so we have a special focus on that as well. And I asked Jennifer if this was all right to say, but in doing that, we will be looking to hire some people this summer to actually work on this non-response follow-up with us. So if you know of anybody or you would be interested in a part-time summer job, or if you have any other questions, this is my email address right here. And that's it. Additional questions.
And don't forget to use the microphones.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, you mentioned Metro and ODOT at the beginning of the presentation. Are they providing funding for the pilot in Oregon?
I'm not privy to their funding sources necessarily. I know that our bills go to ODOT. Actually, our bills go to PB Consult. PB Consult's bills go to ODOT. I imagine they probably have FHWA funds to conduct this, but I don't know.
I think ODOT is the primary funding
It is.
agency with maybe some support from Metro on that. But
And they probably got their funds. ODOT got its funds from FHWA, I would imagine, but I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah.
On the dual frame sample, what linkages do you use between the address-based and the RDD to compare the two?
What we do is we actually start with a full address-based frame. And so what we do is we start with pulling our sample, not from the telephone book, but from providers that actually provide listed and unlisted addresses. So and you can buy those frames right now from the USPS. And USPS is a client of ours, so we can we get the USPS database. And so you start with the USPS database. You do so you're starting with from the same frame. You do a reverse to get phone numbers, and then you use those phone numbers to develop as seeds for the RDD sample. So you're starting with your ultimate frame as an RDD, as a address-based frame. And the reason, and what we do then is we look at, we pull the RDD frame, and then with known probabilities of selection, we actually go in and focus on census tracts that we want to focus in on for special reasons, like it allows us to find a special population. Yeah. I mean, I can, if you're interested in that, I can give you more on the technical specifics of that, exactly how you do the dual frame sample. Right. We used approach, here we were using it to find transit users. In the valley on the Texas-Mexico border, we actually used it to find non-telephone households, to bring non-telephone households into our sample.
Now, the issue of cell phone usage, which is increasing, and often, there's serious questions about the RDD sample as how reflective it is. Is that something that you're looking at as an issue also, or?
It's always an issue, no matter where you go. People are concerned about cell phone users. The latest thinking that I've seen on cell phone usage is that the percent of households that it's the cell phone only households that we're concerned about, and that percent is still about between 5 and 7%, although it is higher with certain populations, immigrant populations, people typically from 18 to 24 years. And so if you're doing a survey where you're particularly concerned about those populations, it becomes an issue. The problem is we don't have a frame. And there's a double problem. We don't have a frame, so we can't pull a sample of cell phone only users because there's no directory of cell phone numbers. And the cell phone providers, last year there was a association that was trying to get a cell phone directory together, but the providers don't want to do it because it's their subscribers. So it's they don't want someone getting a hold of it and trying to pull their subscribers away. So the last I heard is that the directory is not going to happen. Now, compounding that is the fact that there used to be this separation between cell phone number exchanges and regular landline exchanges, but with number portability, that's going away. So what we've done is we usually have a screening question in our surveys that says something like, did I reach you on a cell phone? If the answer is yes, then is there a landline that I can reach you on? If they say no, then that person gets counted as a cell phone only user. We can't typically do the survey with that person because that's against FCC regulations. Someone can't pay for a phone call. That's a survey. Now, there's some services now where you don't have to pay for every call that comes into you. So everything's changing. In fact, anyone that's going to TRB this year, next year, 2005, we're actually the Travel Survey Methods Committee of TRB that I chair. We're holding a special session that we're calling a cell phone summit. We're bringing in the best minds best informed people that we know around the country to come and talk about this cell phone issue because everyone's so interested in it. And there's no good answer. I mean, no one knows what to do about cell phones, to be honest.
We've got a question from Webland. So.
Oh, okay.
3 people out there watching.
Oh.
So on one of your first slides, you had gaps in data collection compiled for the Portland metro area. Is that just for Portland area, or is it gaps in general?
Gaps in general. Yeah, the pilot is only in Portland. The actual survey will be statewide. Yes.
About how many respondents do you need from the sample to have it be representative of the general population? When comparing some of the data, do you use like analysis of variance or hypothesis testing to, say, compare modal split?
The first question is, the easiest answer to that is something that depends on what you want to use the data for. Because, there are representative polls that go on nationally that use a sample size of 1,000 to represent the entire country. Where sample size becomes an issue is that when the way you want to use and analyze the data and how many groups you want to partition the sample up into. And so there's no real set answer to that. There are guidelines for statistical significance of particular sample sizes, but one needs to think about what's the smallest subgroup that I want to analyze and make sure I have enough of those cases in my sample. So that said, going around and doing activity and travel surveys for various regions, the small region typically can get by with a sample size between 600, small MPO 600 to 1,000. A mid-size MPO, anywhere from 200 to 600,000 people, probably 15 to 2,200 sample size. And then when you get into the large urban areas, you're really talking typically something on the order of 6,000 to 10,000. Statewide samples now are for activity and travel behavior surveys are in the neighborhood of 15,000, 16,000. I mean, but that's just what has been done, and there's all sorts of budget implications for those sorts of things. But it really comes down to is how you want to analyze the data, and your question about how mode split and what analysis you use to look at something like that. I would imagine you could use a lot of different things. In my analyses, I'm not a modeler. I'm a survey researcher, although I do do travel behavior analysis. And if I'm looking at something like mode differences, I might use a logit model, or I might use an analysis of variance. I mean, it depends on the question that's being answered. Might just use crosstabs. I don't know, Yeah.
Curious on the GPS units. Sounds like you send someone out to the household, give them maybe some instructions on how to use it. You go back and you pick it up. Have you ever had problems with them disappearing or breaking or
No,
anything like that?
We've been very fortunate, and we actually have been very fortunate with all the technology that we've deployed. We use a lot of handhelds for other things, like at the conference, the applications conference. I'm making a presentation on some handhelds we used to do a visitor travel survey in the Tahoe Basin area, and we didn't have any of surveyors leaving with our handhelds. We've never had a problem with not being able to get GPS units back from households, and it's one of the reasons why we have people deliver the units and pick up the units. When I did the survey for Southern California, the SCAG Activity and Travel Survey, the subcontractor, Battelle was the subcontractor to that for the GPS portion, and they actually tried to save some cost, mail out and mail back the GPS units. Now, they did have a lossage problem with the mail out, mail back. People said they never got them. I don't know what they're going to do with the GPS unit that all it does is collect data, but they did have lossage. And so we found with the going out and picking them up, we've never had a problem with that.
What sort of data was collected by the GPS? Was it just starting and stopping location, or did it include like velocity and route
Yeah, it
travel?
always collects velocity. Basically, speed. Basically what you get, and that's actually the speed is what's used to segment the data streams into trips, and that's actually one of the taking the GPS data and the segmenting into trips is both an art and a science. The science is the software that's used, but the art is determining if you see a stop in the 20-second stop or a 2-minute stop or a 1-minute stop, is knowing, is that a real stop or is that congestion? Is it a stop sign? What is it that's happening? Is that really a stop that signifies the end of a trip? And actually, some of the work that's being done now is trying to get rules and algorithms and refine the rules and algorithms that are being used to segment the GPS streams into trips. Because there's a lot of debate about what constitutes a stop and the end of a trip in a GPS stream. Yes?
Could you talk about how the survey's been changed to capture the attitudinal or qualitative data you mentioned?
In the pilot test, what we've done is added several questions that try and get at some things. Not a lot, but there's a question that asks, when we contact the household to collect their travel data, we ask, was this day representative, a typical travel day for you? a typical Monday for you. And if they say yes, that's fine. If they say no, we try and ask, well, what was different about this Monday from a typical Monday, to try and get at those things that happened during the day that might have changed their travel patterns. We also ask a similar set of questions for each trip. We ask, after we collect the information on the trip, we ask, was this a trip that you had planned at the beginning of the day, or is this a trip that came up during the day? And then we ask what triggered that trip that came up. We also ask the same thing about each destination they go to. Was this your planned destination for this trip, or did something happen that made you change your destination for this trip? So we're asking some open-ended questions during their data retrieval process. Yeah.
I'm just curious with the new school policies and the school signs that are going on. Do you have any kind of survey that is just specific to school zones for study of the children behavior?
No, and I don't know. I would love to find funding for a study of children's travel behavior, because I think one place where travel models are really missing data is children's data. I don't think we're capturing in our travel diaries. In fact, I know we're not capturing or children's travel, because parents don't know. Parents are reporting for their children, and they don't know everything their child does.
Yeah. What's the memory capacity of the on-person GPS device, and how often do you need to go and retrieve the data?
I don't know that specific answer to that question. I could get it, but it's not a fact that I have at my fingertips. If Jean Wolfe was here from GeoStats, who built the units, she could tell you that. She could tell you that. She could tell you more about that unit than you would want to know. But I'll give you her email address, and you can ask her. And I believe right now the units with the memory capacity that they have are actually turned on so that when they're delivered to the household, which is a day before, they're on, and they're also on when they're picked up, which is the day after. And so they're on for 3 days. But I do know that we've looked at doing 7-day GPS tracking, travel tracking, and I think you could do 7 days also with the same memory capacity that these have.
Speaking of the kids, so you're having kids 14 and older, I think you said, wear the GPS.
Right.
Are the parents asking if they can see that data to know where their kids go?
That's a good question. I don't know, but we promise the confidentiality to the kids as well. So, and that's what we were trying to get the cutoff of, where parents would feel okay about their kids carrying this and the parents not knowing what the data says. That was one of the issues. And we also give the kids to retrieve the information. They have a toll-free number too, and so that was the other cutoff. Where would parents feel comfortable with their child calling in or have someone calling them to retrieve that information? So there's all these issues once you start getting into preteens or kids with the GPS units that it's a gray area. We haven't done enough research, and we really don't know what's the tolerance level for getting information like that from your child. Yeah.
Is the pilot study, I know that in Cosmos we're looking at possibly doing some longitudinal panel analysis, and is that being examined as part of the pilot study? Or are we just mainly looking at the methods for collecting the data?
We're mainly looking at the methods for collecting the data, because depending on what we find in terms of this cost-quality trade-off, that affects the sample size, which affect how the panel will be done. It affects a lot of different things. And so this was really when we had, of course, a lot more questions that we wanted to answer with the pilot than we really could. And I think there was a question back here. Yes.
In picking your sample, is there any screening for age?
I'm sorry, use the microphone so the web has, hold the touch button so the red light's on. At the bottom, towards the bottom. There, thank you.
In picking your sample, is there any screening done for income levels and age groups?
There's in the pilot, there isn't. We're just recruiting in specifically. If this were a regular survey, and depending on how the sample was stratified, there's never screening per se. I mean, you always ask age and income, and during the course of the course of doing the survey, you monitor those with census data next to you to see, to try and track as much as possible so you're getting a representative sample. But there's typically not a screening per se where I have a quota on age or income, and if I reach that, I shut it off. Unless, this was not so much being done anymore, but in the 80s and 90s, travel surveys were often, the samples were set up so you had age and household income or number of vehicles and household size matrices that created cells, and you filled them, so when you finish the data, your database would represent or at least have a good distribution of those two variables. But now there are so many variables like presence of children, number of workers, that people are as interested in. So what we try and do is just make sure that the sample, as much as we can, approximates the census distributions on key demographics for the region or the area.
Thank you very much. Before we thank Johanna, I want to announce next week, on a similar theme in terms of surveys and data, we have Elaine Murakami and Ed Christopher from the Federal Highway Administration. The topic is Data RS, Personal Travel Data Sources for Planning, and they'll be talking about the Census Transportation Planning Package and the National Household Travel Survey, so sources of data that's collected through methods sometimes like this. So thank you very much, Johanna.
Thank you, Jennifer.